2023. Today, for the first session, we have Dr. Raghunath S., Professor, BMS College of Engineering, Bangalore, Karnataka. Uh, we welcome you, all of you, for this particular session where we have our esteemed speaker. We are very happy to have you, sir, for this particular session. And I request Dr. Sri Keshwa to brief the profile.
Good morning, Dr. S. Raghunath sir. We welcome you to this ISTE and AICTE sponsored 1 week FDP event on behalf of Jyoti Institute of Technology and AICTE and ISTE. Once again, we are welcoming you for this event, sir. Professor S. Raghunath sir is currently working as professor at BMS College of Engineering and is having 33 years of academic teaching experience as well as more than 25 years of research experience. Professor Raghunath sir did BE in Civil Engineering and ME in Construction Technology from UVCE Bangalore and PhD in Structural Engineering at Indian Institute of Science IISc Bangalore under the mentorship of Professor K.S. Jagdish sir. Research interest includes structural masonry, experimental dynamics, earthquake resistant buildings, alternative building materials and methods, energy and buildings, restoration and structural strengthening of heritage buildings. Sir supervised more than 60 PG dissertations and 9 PhD theses, carried out a few sponsored R&D projects and published about more than 50 research papers. Sir also a structural consultant for many government and private agencies, especially in the area of structural masonry and restoration of heritage buildings. Professor Raghunath sir also involved actively in with NIVAS, an NGO, architectural NGO, working to enable human and dignified housing conditions for the urban and rural poor through design. Once again, on behalf of Jyoti Institute of Technology and all participants, we welcome you to this particular FDP, sir. Thank you, sir. Sir, you can continue your presentation, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Sri Keshava. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Okay, so at the outset, I would like to thank especially Dr. Sri Keshava for inviting me to share this case study with the participants of this workshop. I'm really thankful to him. I got an opportunity to interact with the Jyoti Institute of Technology. I hope to be there in person sometime soon once everything normalizes. So, good morning to all of you. So, and I also would like to thank the Institute, okay, for making this arrangement possible. I will now share my screen. Is the screen visible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Just give me a minute. Okay. I'm going to discuss something about repair and rehabilitation of a heritage building. I mean, I'm going to take up a case study. I have divided this session into 3 parts actually. If time permits, I may go to the 4th part. I'm not sure about that. So in the first part, very briefly, I'm going to give some information and terminologies which are commonly used in whenever one is involved with repair, rehabilitation, strengthening, retrofitting, conservation, and so on and so forth. And the second part is the crux of my interaction today. I'm going to discuss about the case study in detail. And lastly, I'm going to make some closing remarks. That should be the sort of the takeaway from this session. And as I mentioned earlier, if time permits, I'm going to discuss very briefly about the seismic retrofitting of a heritage building. So I go ahead with the first part of my lecture. Actually, when we talk about a heritage building, the first question which comes to our mind is, what exactly is a heritage building? When do you call a building as a heritage building? How do you define the parameters of a heritage building? These are all some of the questions which is going to bother anybody who is going to be involved in this. Just because if some building is very old, do we consider it as heritage building? Or just because it happens to be of some historical value, do we consider it as heritage building? These are all some of the things which never used to be defined in a neat manner earlier. But now, thanks to quite a lot of organizations and including some government organizations, we now know how to define a heritage building, and we now know how to give a value to that heritage building. There are what is called as conservation doctrines available with us now. In India, for instance, ASI, okay, has come out with a national conservation policy. Okay, it states that, okay, it requires that systematically all monuments of national importance be scientifically assessed and retrofitted. What is meant by a national importance? What are the monuments of national importance? Is database in this policy document, and ASI has got a data bank of all these monuments. It explicitly requires all conservation efforts at any monument to be accompanied by, of course, it has to be prevented from natural calamities and any disasters which might occur in the future. Okay, so it also has got that embedded into that document or into that policy. On an international level, there is this ICOMOS charter, okay, and it was started in 1993. Now it is updated, okay, rather 1964. Now it is updated to 2014, and as recently as 2021, again it has been updated. Apart from that, there are other organizations who are also sort of networked with these organizations. For instance, the International Scientific Committee on Analysis and Restoration of Structures of Heritage, Architectural Heritage, it has come out with certain guidelines. I'm going to dedicate 2 or 3 slides about what ICAR-SAH talks about. By the way, the National Center for Safety of Heritage Structure is now housed in IIT Madras. And if you go to the homepage of NCSHS, you get a lot of information on heritage buildings. And you also get to know different case studies carried out in association with IIT Madras. They are really interesting and they are really very educative. And you can, depending upon your interests, you can pick up any of the monuments and you can go into the details of those case studies. Okay, coming back to this, the draft guidelines, as I mentioned, as recently as 2020-21, this ICAR-SAH, okay, the guideline is catered to provide criteria and assistance for the study and intervention of heritage structures. If there are some stakeholders who need certain assistance on how to go about conservation or restoration or retrofitting or rehabilitation and things like that, one can always approach and one can always use these draft guidelines. It is going to help you in going about your work. Of course, the guidelines are based on the premise that a combination of both scientific and cultural insight has to be there, in addition to the necessary knowledge of all experts involved. Okay, so that's very important. It goes without saying. And any work involving conservation, restoration, rehabilitation of heritage building is actually multidisciplinary in approach. Okay, it involves not only civil engineering and architecture, it also involves historians, it also involves social engineering, it also involves a lot of interaction with stakeholders. So it also involves a lot of historians and so on and so forth. Okay? So it's a very interesting multidisciplinary topic, so to say. And that is recognized by ICAR-SAH, okay, and the draft guidelines also. In fact, it encourages one to go about this solution for these problems in the multidisciplinary approach. Okay, it is not siloed as the other branches of engineering or the conventional branch of engineering. ARSAH, the draft guideline, also talks about how are you going to define the character of a heritage building. Okay, there are certain things which are tangible or quantified. There are certain things which are not quantifiable. Okay, it also gives certain guidelines for that. For instance, if you look at an old building, you may think that it does not have any character and things like that as a common man or as a layman. But if you go into these draft guidelines, it also tells you what are the elements which you need to look out for. What is the character? How do you identify the character? Is it associated with some social values or the cultural values in and around, or in the local level, or in the national level, or sometimes even in the international level? It gives certain guidelines. Okay. Of course, in doing so, it talks about the monumental values, aesthetic value, historical value, lastly about the technical value. Technical value is something which civil engineers will be able to easily comprehend and then go about. Okay. Aesthetic value, architects and conservation architects are going to be helpful in that. Okay. Going further, a couple of more slides. Okay, it talks about the fact that there are some of the heritage buildings which go beyond the existing codal provisions. Okay, so because of course the codal provisions have evolved over the last few decades, or probably just about a century and back or so. Many of the heritage buildings, on the other hand, predates all these codal provisions. Okay, it talks about the limitations of applying the present day codal provisions to such buildings. Okay, and it also talks about how to go about the solution through conventional approach, of course based on sound scientific principles. It also gives guidelines for structural performance and verification and validation. Okay, so and it strongly emphasizes the fact that whenever we go about restoration or conservation or repair and things like that, the approach, okay, is that it has to be based on what is called as a minimal intervention program. As far as possible, try to do as less as possible and try to get maximum benefits out of it. Okay, that exactly is the challenge in conservation of heritage buildings. Okay, now with those background information, as I mentioned earlier, one can go to these websites and then get more information and be educated. It's always interesting to be aware of all these things. I will now move on to, by the way, I'm going to share this PPT with Dr. Sri Keshava, and in turn, he's going to relate on to all the participants. Now I'm going to talk about a few definitions which are very important actually. Okay, honestly, I also used to get confused with certain definitions. What exactly is repair? What exactly is retrofitting, strengthening, and so on and so forth. But I have made some bullet points for you to understand this very easily. And then when I talk about the case study, you will be able to relate to these definitions very easily. When you talk about repair, it refers to post-damage structural and or architectural intrusion. For example, if there is a damage to a heritage building, I may drop the word heritage. Okay, I may just use the word building itself. Okay, if there is a damage to a building, when you talk about repair, it means it is after the damage has occurred. Okay, so obviously it's very easy to understand. Okay, repair means that it is going to bring back the damaged portion of the building into functionality, just like it had before its damaged state. Okay, it does not improve or increase the strength or the performance beyond its pre-damaged state. Okay, so it's as simple as that. Okay, so very simple. Okay, so you just, if there is something which is not working, you just get it repaired and start getting it working. Okay. Just to the pre-damaged state. Usually repair and restoration are cosmetic in nature. Okay, that's what generally people have an understanding about. So they are considered as cosmetic in nature, just to bring it to the pre-damaged state. Of course, when I say cosmetic in nature, it does not mean that it should mar the character of the building. Very, very important. Even when you do this repair, it has to be based on the minimal intervention criteria. The next parameter or the terminology which one has to be aware is called as strengthening. It comprises of technical interventions in the structural system to any of the structural component of the building or holistically for the entire building to improve its performance for a specific task. Okay. For example, an old building might have been designed for certain amount of live load. At present, the live load might have got increased because of the change in the functionality or change in the usage. You may have to strengthen it for the existing load conditions. Okay, so you just cannot be done with the repair. Okay, you may have to strengthen it and start using it. Of course, when you talk about strengthening, you always refer to different levels of strengthening. To what level of performance you are looking at strengthening. Okay, you can talk about different levels. Okay, just a marginal to maximum level of strengthening. Again, I reiterate that whenever you do any of these things, it should be based on the minimal intervention criteria. Just because you want to strengthen an old building does not mean that you can add huge girders and then change the character of the building. Okay, that's the bottom line. I'm not going to repeat that once again. Now, this term retrofitting is something which is very commonly used. Okay, strengthening before an anticipated distress is called as retrofitting. But after the distress has already occurred, okay, it's very important. Say, for example, there is an unfortunate event of an earthquake and a building has got damaged, but it has not fallen. You can actually either repair it or retrofit it. If you repair it, you are going to bring it back to its original condition. It means that in the future event of an earthquake, again, it might get damaged. Okay. On the other hand, if you retrofit it, okay, in the future event of an earthquake, okay, it can withstand that earthquake events. Okay, that is called as retrofitting. Okay, in anticipation of a future event, you are going to do this. Okay, so that's called as retrofitting. Okay, so of course there are two schools of thought. Some people say that's not the definition of retrofitting and it is rehabilitation and things like that. But I have taken it from the guidelines which I mentioned earlier. Strengthening after damage has occurred, okay, could also incorporate, it can also incorporate additional loads. Okay, that is called as rehabilitation. I'm going to leave it to the participants to delve into these two terminologies. Okay, you can make your own understanding of this. Okay, so I have used certain guidelines. Okay, so that's the reason why I gave these two terminologies separately. There is also another very interesting term which one has to be aware of, especially civil engineers, they have to be aware of. It is called as protection. It refers to ensuring desired performance against a particular effect. Okay, I can give a small example, very simple example. Let us assume that there is a heritage building which is in distress. And for example, let us assume that it is in distress because of some cracking and an ingress of water due to rain and external environment. Before you take up any comprehensive retrofitting or rehabilitation or conservation program, you may want to protect it from future immediate events. For example, if it starts raining heavily, you don't want it to get damaged in the short term. So you need to protect it. One of the simple ways of protecting it is to cover it with some plastic cover or drain of the water. Okay, so that is called as protection. Okay, that's also allowed. Okay, so it refers to ensuring a desired performance against a particular effect. It could be a short-term effect or a long-term effect. Again, the bottom line is about minimal intervention. Protections you can always do in temporary basis. Okay, you can protect the building up to a certain time event, okay, and then again go back to the original condition. Okay, the next term which one has to be aware of is called as modification. Okay, of course, civil engineers and architects do prefer this modification extensively in many of the situations. Okay, so it refers to partial or slight change in the structural or the architectural form. Especially if you want to change the usage pattern. Let us assume that there is an old library building, heritage library building, and you want to modify it to the modern day requirements. Okay, it is allowed. okay, as per the guidelines. Okay, it could be partial or it could be a slight change. For example, you may want to remove a load-bearing system, okay, which is not adding to the character of the building. You can do that. Okay, so that is called as modification. Okay, of course, when you talk about modification, you talk about change in the structural form. This could improve or reduce certain performance requirement. We have to be very careful about that. Okay, in a load-bearing system, it is okay to remove non-load-bearing elements. But if you want to modify the load-bearing element, it may change its performance. So we have to be very careful about that. In fact, in the case study which I'm going to discuss very soon, I'm going to talk about how certain modification was actually necessary and it added to the character of the building. The next term which we need to be aware of is called as rectification. Straight away, it's very easy. If there is a mistake, you need to rectify it. As simple as that. Okay, it refers to setting right a mistake that has happened knowingly or unknowingly. Okay, it's as simple as that. Okay, it does not mean that all the heritage buildings were constructed without any mistakes at all. There are quite a few examples of heritage buildings which have been constructed with a lot of mistakes. Okay, it has withstood all these things despite all these mistakes. Okay, so you may want to rectify it. Okay, so that's also something which one has to be aware of. Again, the rectification can be a minor rectification or major, depending upon the quantum of the mistake. Maintenance, okay, something is very easy to comprehend straight away. Okay, the amount of work or the work needed to preserve the intended load carrying capacity. Please note that the underlined word, to preserve the intended load carrying capacity. From the point of view of structural engineering, okay, maintenance is required to preserve the intended load carrying capacity. For instance, okay, if there are steel girders in the heritage building, okay, you need to maintain it regularly to prevent it from getting corroded or deteriorated. You don't want the steel girders to lose its capacity. Okay, you need to maintain it. If there are timber rafters, you need to maintain it. You don't want it to deteriorate and then be affected by worms and other things. Okay, you have to be very careful about that. Okay, that's very important. And in fact, one has to come out with a maintenance protocol once the entire process is done. Very, very important. Even new building needs maintenance. Okay, the modern day buildings also needs maintenance. So there is nothing wrong about it. Any system, okay, any engineering system does need maintenance. So is the case with heritage buildings as well. Of course, it excludes any work leading to improvement of the structure by strengthening or to carry heavier loads or additional load cases. Okay, it includes the prevention of deterioration by normal causes, okay, or the wear and tear and so on and so forth. You can't have a protocol for maintenance when there is a vandalism which is going to come in, okay, things like that. Okay, so one has to live with it. Okay. Maintenance, of course, deserves extreme attention. Okay, I have given an example. For example, in railways, there is what is called as permanent way inspectors. They are the ones who maintain these tracks. Very, very important. It's a crucial lifeline of railways. So these permanent way inspectors, their only job is to ensure that, okay, the system, the railway tracks is in functionality, okay, without compromising on safety. Very, very important. It needs to be performed in a systematic manner. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, we need to come out with a protocol of maintenance. Okay, you need to have a checklist. Okay, you have to do it in a very systematic manner. You cannot bypass any of the parameters given in the protocol. All structures should be designed and constructed with consideration of both capital expenditure and predictable maintenance cost. Okay, one of the common mistakes which many of us tend to do, okay, or we just tend to think that, okay, once you comprehensively repair and rehabilitate a building, you don't need to worry about it for the next 50 years or 100 years. Okay, it's not like that. It has got both capital expenditure and it also has got a maintenance cost. So it has to be considered when you're talking about financial implications. Lastly, the maintenance of engineering work begins from the day these have been constructed, right from the day. Okay, so it's not that you can start the maintenance after 2 decades or 3 decades and things like that. Okay, it starts from day zero. Two more terminologies before I close the first part of my lecture. Conservation and restoration. It describes the process through which the material, the historical and the design integrity of any built heritage are prolonged through carefully planned intervention. It's very easy to understand what it is. Okay, when you conserve something, it means you are going to extend its life without compromising on its performance. You are going to extend its life carefully. Typically, for instance, I can give a very amusing example. The modern day cricketers, okay, if they want to prolong their career in the sports, they may want to drop out on one of the formats. Probably they may want to drop out on the test match and then prolong their career in T20s and ODIs. They want to prolong their career further in cricketing sports. They may drop out on two formats and continue only on one format. Okay, that is called as conservation. You are going to conserve the performance, okay, through a carefully planned intervention technique in engineering. I'm talking. Okay, it includes examination, documentation, treatment, and preventive care. Okay. By the way, all these terminologies very interestingly are used in medical field also. Whatever happens to a building, the same thing is valid for a human being also. Okay, you retrofit, you repair, you operate, okay, you modify, you conserve, okay, and you prolong the lifespan of a human being. All these things, okay, there are a lot of remarkable coincidences between medical field and civil engineering. There are certain things, okay, sometimes in the process of conservation, you may want to stabilize certain things. It might be there could be a subtle loss of stability. You may want to stabilize it before you go ahead with the comprehensive plan. Case in point here is the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Okay, ironically, the Leaning Tower of Pisa got its heritage value because of the fact that it started leaning. Had it not leaned, it would not have got its heritage value, in my opinion. Okay, very important. You don't want it to lean further. At the same time, you don't want it to bring it to vertical position. That's something of a challenge for civil engineers. Here is a paradox. Okay, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, you don't want to make it vertical. At the same time, you don't want it to lose its stability. Okay, so that is something of a paradox. Okay. Restoration refers to treatment procedures intended to return components to a known or assumed state. Okay, you restore it to a known state, okay, a predefined state. Okay, so it's actually quite difficult because a priori you do not know what was its original state until and unless you come out with archival studies. Okay, this is where conservation architects are going to help us. Okay, whenever we involve with conservation architects, they do a lot of archival studies. They dig into the history of the building and the stakeholders, and they get the information through their archival studies. Okay, and they also study the parallel history, okay, of a similar building or an identical building. Okay, so that way you will be able to know what was its intended or assumed state. A repeat of this, rehabilitation operations aim at restoring the structure to its original service level. Okay. In some cases, this consists of giving the structure the service level which was intended but could not be attained because of inherent deficiencies in the original design. Okay. So, when to rehabilitate? Okay, now having done with these terminologies, okay, let us move to very important question which I posed in the beginning of my lecture. First of all, when do you define a building as a heritage building? Okay, and there are guidelines for that. When to rehabilitate it? Okay, at what point in time you want to rehabilitate it, or do you want the building to continue in the existing condition? Okay, these are all some of the questions. Okay, very interestingly, in our archaeological survey of India, quite a few monuments, we do not go about rehabilitating them. We continue with conserving them until unless you come out with some known signs of distress. Okay, so for example, the monuments, many of the monuments in heritage monuments in Karnataka, you just continue in the same state. Okay, you conserve it. That's it. Okay, you don't rehabilitate it. Okay, okay. It depends on these four parameters. Okay, in my opinion, these are the four important parameters. Aging, it depends on aging, weathering, and deterioration. If the levels of deterioration, if there is a positive sign in the change in deterioration, you need to rehabilitate. Okay, and if you know that aging is leading to deterioration, visible signs of deterioration or documented evidence, then you need to go for rehabilitation. And if you know that it has got inadequacies, you might as well address it if the financial constraints are permissible. Okay, or if you take care of the financial factors. So it also depends on the damages due to external causes like accident, earthquake, or floods, or fire, and so on and so forth. If there is a heritage building and in the immediate past, if it has met with certain events like a flood or earthquake or accident, you may want to rehabilitate. You don't want to continue in that particular state. It also depends on the change in the load. Many of the heritage buildings are in functional form. Okay, so it's not that they are kept empty. Okay. Quick terminologies: replacement, as the name itself says, you can replace certain components of a building, and if a certain component of a building is broken, okay, or it has come off, you are going to reconstruct. Okay, so probably I'm going to I'll come to the main part of my lecture. The summary of whatever I have been discussing, okay, can be related with one important thing. How are you going to relate the cause and effect? What led to the effect which you actually notice now? If there is a building which has got a crack, what was the reason why that crack happened? If there is a building which is profusely leaking, what is the reason why it has started profusely leaking? Okay. So this is something which is the most difficult thing in my opinion. You need to relate the cause and effect. Okay, that's the most important thing. As a civil engineer, I think that's the most important thing. What is the cause of the damage? What is the cause of the deterioration? What is the cause of the defect? What could be the cause that there is some deficiency in that building or the components of that building? What is the reason why that mistake happened? Okay. Were there any overloads or events, okay, which were overlooked, or were there any accidents it met with earlier? Okay, so you need to relate the cause and effect in measurable and or describable form. If you are not able to do in these two things, okay, you will not be able to go about with the repair or rehabilitation or conservation. Okay, so okay, so lastly, there are a lot of questions which bother most of the stakeholders, okay, including civil engineers. Okay. In the case study which I was involved with, I mean, many of the case studies, these are all some of the questions which bothers us. Okay, how long have the signs of damage been noticed? Okay, you see a crack. Was it a recent one, or was it an ancient one, or is it increasing? Is it changing? Okay, so how do you know the load path? Okay, for which the building was designed. Okay, or what was the intended load path? What was the intended structural form? Okay. Could some defects have been overlooked or unknown? Okay, will there be any further damage when you do something? What happened in a similar structure elsewhere is also very important. Very often we tend to get some kind of safety in knowing what others have done in a similar situation elsewhere. Very, very important. Sharing of knowledge is very important. Okay, and sharing of or in mistakes which we have done, okay, is also very important. You don't want to repeat the mistakes. You want to emulate on the good practices. So in the bottom line is, how do we repair, restore, rehabilitate, or strengthen, or whatever. Okay, so the factors, there are several factors. I have sort of shortlisted them. It depends on the importance. It depends on, obviously, it depends on the cost. It depends on how reliable your maintenance or repair or conservation plan is, how robust it is. Okay, feasible, whether if the cost permits, is it possible to do it? Okay, is also very important. Do you have the wherewithal to do it? Do you have the technology and the skill set to do it? What are the risks associated? Okay, is the scheme of conservation or rehabilitation robust enough? Okay, is it amenable for future modifications? Okay, so for example, you want to introduce something, and if it is not amenable for future modification, it may not be a good idea at all. Okay, so what is the past performance of similar schemes? What is the duration which is required for carrying out all these things? Of course, there are social aspects. Okay, you don't want to change the social aspects. A heritage building is quite dynamic in nature, despite the fact that it looks aged and then lifeless. Okay. But actually it's quite dynamic in nature from the point of view of social engineering. What is the recurrence data? Okay, the damage caused by non-structural elements. All of these plays a very important. I have answered all this question earlier itself. Are there any guidelines? Yes, there are. Okay, but the guidelines are generic. Okay, and one has to come out with innovative, okay, or a case-specific guideline, okay, through comprehensive study of the heritage. Okay, decision making is often quite difficult because, after all, no two heritage buildings could be identical. In fact, no two modern buildings are also identical. Okay, that's a challenge in civil engineering. So is the case with heritage buildings also. Okay, I will skip this. Okay, so also skip this. I will now come to this the second part of my lecture, that is the case study. So this I was fortunate enough to be involved in the rehabilitation and restoration of this particular building. This had a heritage value for several reasons. By the way, this is a building which belongs to the University of Mysore. And you know that the University of Mysore was very proud in the sense that our former president, Dr. Sarvepalli Radhakrishna, resided in that University of Mysore as a professor. And he used this as his residence for a period of 5 years during his academic tenure over there. As a consequence of which it had got heritage value. It also had the heritage value because of the character of this building. Okay, these buildings, along with the university main building and so on and so forth, surrounding buildings. Okay, the hostels and then the administrative building and the library and things like that. They were all built with certain character. Okay, it had given an appeal to the entire campus. Okay, so obviously it also became a heritage building. So the University of Mysore, they were scouting for people who could participate and trying to bring about restoring this building to its original condition, or as near to its original condition as possible. When we first went there, this was the condition of the building. Okay. Now I'm going to proceed really very slowly. Okay. You imagine that you are standing in front of this building. Okay, and trying to make your own observations and then quantification, so to say. Okay. Of course, quite a few things which you can see is that personally, I mean, of course, beauty is lies in the eyes of the beholder. Okay. Had these distresses not been noticed, the building would appear very beautiful. There is no doubt about it. It's a simple two-storied load-bearing masonry building. There is a portico, and you notice that there is a severe crack, okay, in one of the flanges of the building. In fact, the crack is so severe that there is portion of the wall which is on the verge of incipient collapse. Fortunately, it had not collapsed, okay, despite the fact that it was extremely vulnerable when we went there. I'm going to show a close-up photograph of these things. A lot of places, plaster had delaminated. The growth of vegetation, severe growth of vegetation. There's some modification also done. You can notice that the white colored temporary pillar which was erected, okay, there was a girder which had got broken to immediately prevent the entire portico from falling down. Somebody had done this. Okay, it's not that it is a mistake. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, it is a protection technique for that shorter event. So, of course, you see that a lot of tiles of the Bangalore tile roofing in the second floor had come off. Okay, so, and you could also see the aging, okay, and then distress due to the moisture. So, this is something which you can notice. Okay, the first step is to gather the plan form of the building. You need to collect the drawings of the building. Of course, if you do not have the drawing, you need to generate one yourself. Very, very important. Okay, this is where architects are going to help you. They are so well trained in coming out with a measure drawing. Okay, so the a team of architects, they come and then do the measure drawing. Okay, and then provide the information for the civil engineers to understand the structural form. Of course, in this case, two of my former research colleagues, they helped me in coming out with this form. Okay, I'll use this diagram to explain this. By the way, you have to read this carefully. The portico is on the top of this drawing. Okay, so there's this left flange and the right flange. Okay, despite the fact that this building tends to appear to look like a symmetrical building, it is not symmetrical. Okay, the left wing and right wing are different. On the right wing, there is a bay window or the bay projection. And actually it consists of two buildings, okay, one in the front and one in the back. Okay, the back was used for kitchen and service quarters. Okay, so, and there's a open to sky courtyard behind. Okay, so, and there is a staircase from the rear of the front building to go to the rear veranda and come to the living room and then rooms of the upper floor. Okay. Now, so we start with the structural assessment protocol. Okay, you just cannot tell that I observed a crack here and then there's some distress here. Okay, there has to be a systematic way in which you are going to document this. Okay. So the structural assessment protocol. Okay, initially you need to do some exploratory studies, or you can also call it as a reconnaissance study. The more the number of visits you make to the building, the more you understand about the building. It's very important. Okay, so you need to engage with the building quite often in the preliminary stages. Just keep visiting the building and keep observing it. You will be able to understand the structural form easily. Okay, so in my experience, I've noticed that the first time you visit a building, everything might be very complicated. The more the number of times you visit it, okay. Again, the analogy is quite remarkable. Even for a doctor to understand the patients, more number of visits are very important for the patient to visit the doctor. Only then the doctor will be able to make a guess about what is the situation. So exploratory studies are very important. Okay, and during this time you can also get the foundation profiling, which is not visible, of course. Okay, you need to get the foundation profiling, soil investigation done. Okay, it's a mandatory requirement. You need to carefully inspect it. You need to grade the components of the structure based on visual parameters. I'll tell you how to do that. Okay, and you may want to do certain technical inspection tests, like you may want to do some non-destructive testing or partial load testing or comprehensive load testing. Okay, there are so many methods by which you can come out with assessment of the structural parameters. Now, if it were a modern day building, say for example, if it's a modern day concrete building, it is very easy to evaluate the in situ parameters. For example, you have cast a concrete slab. You want to know whether the concrete in that slab is good quality or not. There are several ways by which you can do it. You can do an NDT test, or you can take out a sample. Okay, you can extract the core of the concrete and test it in the laboratory. Or you can actually do proformator test. You can find out you can conduct corrosion testing on the reinforcement and so on and so forth. Okay, but unfortunately, in heritage buildings, most of them were, as I mentioned earlier, they were constructed predating the modern codal provisions. We never had all these things during those times. Okay, so there are some guidelines nevertheless. Okay, but probably we are not aware of that. Okay. We need to rely on this very crucial parameter called as visual strength grading. It appears subjective, but trust me, it is not subjective. Okay. For instance, if you want to do a visual strength grading of timber members, these are the things which you need to look out for. You are going to look out if there is a horizontal splitting in the timber member. Are there any flexural cracks? Are there any flexure shear cracks, or are there any shear compression cracks? Is there any delamination okay, of the timber elements? Is there any loss of cross-section area? Very often these timber rafters, which is embedded in a bearing, okay, in masonry, that portion would have lost its cross-section area. Okay. There could be support degradation. There could be excessive deflection. There could be twisting, warping, okay, loose grains, okay, splits, presence of wormholes, powder post beetles, pitch pockets. There could be some flashing which has given way. Okay, there could be some fungal growth. Okay, there could you can resort to soundness just by gently tapping with some wooden mallet or a hammer. The sound of that timber member is a good indication. Of course, you need experience. This is where very important stakeholder, namely a carpenter, seasoned carpenter, experienced carpenter, will be able to assist us. Okay, so we need to rely on such people, okay, for taking judgment about the condition of the elements. Okay. So just like I mentioned about the visual strength grading for timber members, okay, you also have visual strength grading for masonry elements. You also have visual strength grading for different types of roofing elements. For example, if it is a masonry dome or a vault, okay, you can come out with a visual strength grading. Is there a longitudinal crack? Is there circumferential crack? Okay, is there a radial crack? Okay, is there a settlement crack? So you can come out with a visual strength grading. Okay, so it's very important. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to repeat it. Okay, it is not subjective. Okay, it's actually quite objective. It may not be in the form of numbers. Okay, but it's certainly not subjective. Okay, the moment you do this visual strength grading, okay, so you need to document it. You need to convert that into drawings. Very, very important. Okay, is there a settlement? Is okay. So there are a lot of surprises which one may come across when you start doing the documentation, and when you convert that into drawings. Okay, you'll really understand in the engineer's language. Okay, so okay, I don't know why this picture has come back. Okay. Now let us go, okay, virtually into these components of this building. Okay, let us look at this. Straight away, you can see, okay, the upper floor is completely damaged. Okay, it is probably on the grade 4. Okay, grade 5 is complete damage. Okay, grade 4 is on the verge of collapse. Okay. So on the ground floor, the cracks have come. Okay, the huge, severe shear cracks, and it has also percolated into the two-centered arch. And carefully, if you notice, it has also come to the ground level. It also had come to the foundation level. Okay, fortunately, at the end, there is no distress in the foundation. Okay, so you need to expose that part of the foundation and check out if there is any severe settlement cracks in that foundation. Okay, so this is something which, of course, there are always architects who talk about the non-structural components. For example, you see the sunshade and the ornamental components in this. Okay, the brackets and the floral components and the credenzas and things like that. That's where architects are going to document it. Okay, as a civil engineer, you need to talk about the load bearing elements. Okay, so let us go to the left wing of this building. Okay, so when you come to the left wing of this building, again you actually see the amount of deterioration because of the growth of vegetation. Okay, and in the corner of this portion, okay, I'm not sure whether you can see the cursor or. So there's severe vegetation there. Okay, so cracks had appeared there. There's cracks in the floor level and in the arch on these two portions, and in the projected portion of this building. You can actually visibly see them. Something which is very interesting is the more the number of cracks, delamination of the plaster, okay, is an indication that it is a severe crack. Okay, that's one of the signs of masonry. Okay, so as the wall bulges out, it tends to delaminate the plaster. Of course, plaster is a non-structural component. Okay, and sometimes you may want to remove the plaster to have a look at the extent of cracking. It's also very important. Okay, so okay, now we go to the right wing of the building, the bay projection of this building. Fortunately, there's not much damage on this part of the building, but for some amount of delamination at the ground level, just above the plinth level. and probably it was also some kind of vandalism. And you will also notice that there is a small component which is added. It's not the original part of the building. Okay, it was a small room to house a motor. Okay, so that was not the original part of the building. Okay, so it's also interesting to see the architectural features of this building. Something interesting straight away, I can say that you can notice in the ground floor, in the window, there is this corbelling and then the projection done. Okay, so it's going to prevent the rainwater which falls on the wall to directly enter into the window, but it is not there in the upper floor. Straight away, you come to a conclusion that probably there is a mistake which is done the construction. Probably they had constructed this in 2 phases. In the second phase, you never know, they had missed out on this. Okay, you may want to take a call whether you want to introduce that beading here, or or that small component there, or you may want to continue with this. Okay, this is where you can take a call. Okay, so these are some of the questions which actually the building itself educates you. Okay, a careful observation will help you in this. Okay, so we come back to the portico. There's a severe separation of the component, the roof of the portico, and it was supported on the front edge of the building by arches, 3 arches. There's a severe cracking, shear cracking in the arches. Okay. So this is something which you notice. And I come to the front, the portion where you saw severe damage in the front of the upper floor of the room. It had got badly distressed because the roof had come down. So the Madras terrace roof is a timber supported roof. There are timber rafters placed at close intervals, something like approximately 600 mm center to center, 600 to 700 center to center, on which there are thick layers of masonry constructed, and it acts like a roofing element. The timber rafters had gone, okay, and as a consequence of which the Madras terrace masonry part had come down. The entire roof was exposed to sky. And you will also notice that there is a growth of this vegetation. Okay. It had added to the distress. Okay. Very ideal for the trees to grow. Okay. It has got a good amount of nutrients for itself to grow. And this is the amount of distress you see in the upper portion of the portico. Okay, so in front of this, the portico also had partially damaged. Okay, there's one huge 1 meter diameter depression. In fact, carefully when we went there, and then when we just poked it with a crowbar, okay, the entire thing came down. 1 meter diameter of the wall came down. Okay, but to be very careful about that as well. So this is a close-up view of the, I cannot call it as a crack. Okay, it is already, okay, so loss of the elements itself. Now here is something which I would like you to ponder upon. Okay, if you carefully look at, recall the plan form, there's an internal staircase. Okay, and this was an external staircase constructed in RCC. Obviously, you don't need to make you don't need to have profound knowledge. This was added at a late stage, okay, for the servants to come and access the upper floor of the building. Okay, it was added at a late stage. Okay. So they had removed a window opening and converted that into a door opening, and they had added this staircase. Obviously, the conservation architect would be concerned about this, and even a layman would be concerned about its the character of this building. We took a call to remove the staircase, okay, and bring it back to the original functional form. Okay, now I have not gone into the inner details. I'll come to that also very quickly. This is how you do this visual strength grading. Carefully go into all the components of the building. Okay, keep documenting all the components: the roof, the wall, the lintels, the arches, the porticos, okay, the doors and the windows. Of course, they may be non-structural components. The pillars, okay, the supporting systems, the balustrades, and all these things, circular openings, and so on and so forth. The eaves level, the gable level, the plinth level, all these things you need to carefully observe it, keep documenting it. Okay. In fact, documenting it is itself is a very interesting field of architecture. Okay, after you do the documentation, you also need to collect some engineering inputs from it. Okay, typically you collect a few samples of the load bearing elements. You have to be very judicious in collecting the samples. Okay, you may in the process you may not want to destroy or make the building distressed. Okay, carefully take out a few sample of bricks and mortar. Okay, try to assess its parameter. Of course, you resort to a laboratory test. You see my former colleague, late Parsati, who used to help us in all these things. Okay. Obviously, that was a heritage masonry building. We need to assess its masonry capabilities. We took out the brick samples, the mortar samples, and then did it in the laboratory and tested the prisms, and we were able to assess its prism strength, okay, to the maximum extent possible. Okay. And sometimes, okay, but this is just a representative picture, not with respect to that particular building. The Madras terrace roofing or jackass roofing or any roofing system, if the visual strength grading does not give you good amount of confidence to judge the condition, you may want to resort to load test. A load test is very simple and straightforward. It may be complicated to execute. Okay, but in principle, it's very simple. You subject the roofing elements or any of the structural components to the prescribed load. For example, if it is a roofing element and it was used as a residential building, you know that it had to be designed for 2 kilonewton per meter square in the present codal provisions. You load it to its a factored load, 1.5 is a factored load, and go beyond, well beyond it, and get a load versus deflection curve. Okay, knowing that load versus deflection, you will be able to assess its stiffness, okay, and its strength. You will also be able to assess its residual strength beyond the working capacity, okay, or the unfactored load. Okay, this is very important. You may want to go to the load test protocol, and in the event that you are not able to make any judgment from NDT and visual inspection and other distress parameters. Okay, this is a last resort. You don't want to do this as first step. Okay. Of course, there are NDT. Okay, I think I should have shown this slide earlier and later on that shown the load test. Just like you do NDT for any of the modern day materials and components, you also have this special rebound hammer for masonry, different types of transmitters and receivers for pulse velocity measurements. Okay. So, okay. Now, having done this and then documented the entire thing, okay, how do we go about this repairing techniques? Okay, so you come out with a scheme and indicate your scheme both through drawings and through photographic processes. Okay, sometimes the drawings may not be comprehensible by some of the stakeholders who are involved in the repair process. Okay, you may want to indicate it on the picture itself. I mean, these days you have got these tools to do that. Okay, I may not be able to go to the complete technical details of how to. I'm going to use the word stitching of a crack. Okay, a crack can be arrested from further growth, and then it can be closed back by a technique called as stitching. Okay, using reinforcements. Okay. You can do it in a very systematic manner, and you can do it comprehensively through a high-end engineered product. There are a lot of engineered product available for stitching of masonry. One such product was used in this building also. They were provided by Mrs. Helifix. They are well-known experts in stitching of masonry. So, in a simple manner, if there is a vertical crack, you need to stitch it horizontally. If there is a horizontal crack, you need to stitch it vertically. Okay. And if there are cracks in an arch, radial cracks, you may want to stitch it diagonally. Okay. So I'm trying to make it in a very simple layman term. Okay. But there are guidelines available for that also. And you also need to do some empirical designs for that. Okay. Each and every vendor of this technique, okay, they come out with their specification. Okay, so they would have done a lot of laboratory tests, and you can also do that if you got a wherewithal to do that in your own laboratory. Okay, so you resort to these techniques. Okay, so here is something on the left-hand side of my screen. You see the locations of the thin reinforcement to be introduced in the bed joints of the masonry, which we had indicated. Okay, and the team had executed that. Can you see the thin gray lines? Okay, they are the thin reinforcement and then surrounded by compatible grout. Okay, it is compatible with the surrounding lime mortar masonry. Okay, lime surki masonry. Okay. So, and you can also notice that it's so thin that it may not change the character of the building. And once you plaster it, it gets covered. Okay, so this is the technique which is suggested. You can also, the corner separation is something which is quite complicated to handle. Okay, you can use a ferrule and drive a hole, okay, a thin hole, and then insert the reinforcement and tighten it. Okay, and you can bring back the close the cracks. Okay, if you are not able to do this, you may want to resort to reconstruction, careful reconstruction, removal of that component of the building and reconstruct. Okay. And here is another example. There are multiple horizontal stitching which was suggested. It was done. Okay, and then there's a crack in the arch, a radial crack in the arch. There's a diagonal sem tie which was introduced that you will not be able to see in this right-hand picture. I'll show a close-up view of that at a later stage. Okay, so this was done systematically. Obviously, when you notice a crack, you want to do all these stitching, you have to remove the plaster. That's something which you have to be careful of. Okay. Similarly, for each and every portion of the building, you need to come out with a comprehensive, okay, repair retrofitting scheme, okay, through some indicators. Okay, so different vendors have got different indicators. You can also come out with this, okay, descriptors and indicators, legends. You can do this. Okay. Okay. This is the portion where I was mentioning that in the portico, a huge portion of the wall roofing, okay, had collapsed. Okay. It was actually quite precarious. Okay. So this is the portico, and you recall that there's a severe shear crack in the one of the arches. Okay. So we had to do multiple strengthening here. Okay. And so this is where you can't do anything. You may have to rebuild it. Okay. When you want to rebuild it, you have to be very careful. You need to be very innovative. Are you going to remove this wall and rebuild it, or carefully rebuild only the portion of the wall which has got, which is not present over there? Okay, that is where safety protocols are very important. I think the presence of all these stakeholders over there when these things are done is very, very important. Unlike the new construction, where you come out with the instruction and the trained masons and then other people, they can construct the building. Okay. And the engineer's presence over there could be quite notional or nominal. Okay. But in case of repair and rehabilitation and restoration, okay, sometimes safety is also in question. You have to be very careful. You should not end up with a bad event in the process. The inside of the building, which I had not shown earlier, the inside of the building was, you could see a lot of cracks in many of the components. Okay. In fact, I just want to tell that this building, it was so badly damaged and cracked that quite a few of the earlier bidders had told that this building is not worth retaining. They had suggested that this building had to be demolished and then construct a new building for some other purpose. But University of Mysore, thanks to the then Vice Chancellor, he was very much keen on restoring this particular building. Okay, that was a challenge to our team also in many ways. Okay, so this is the another portion, okay, badly damaged again because of the roof had collapsed. Okay, because the roof had collapsed, lot of exposure of the internal wall to the rain and the vegetation had added to the distress in the walls. Okay, so multiple layers of stitching had to be done. Okay, and you can see an elliptical arch over there, 3-centered arch, okay, shallow arch, and this is the portion which needed to be rebuilt. But by the way, this is a service quarters, okay, behind the building. And this was the state of the building when we removed some of the roofing elements. It was completely in a bad shape. Okay. So the proximity of certain trees which grows gigantically also causes a lot of problems. You have to take a call on that also. Okay. So now I come to quickly. I come to the repair and rehabilitation and retrofitting. While the surface, obviously, the ornamental work has to follow the structural strengthening. Structural strengthening is the first thing, and the protocol is very simple. If there is any damage or distress in the foundation, you address it first. Then you talk about the vertical load bearing elements, and then you talk about the floors, and then you talk about the roofing elements, and then you talk about the other structural components like staircases and other things. Okay, so this is the protocol. Foundation first, and the last thing is the ornamental features. After the structural strengthening, you need to quickly reassess your entire process before the finishing team comes and then starts plastering. Okay, so you need to come out with a checklist again, whether your scheme has been executed properly or not. You may want to do again a quick test, okay, to check out whether the strengthening is done properly or not. There are protocols for that also. Okay, so the challenge in this particular building was the fact that we had to use lime sukki again. Okay, so because the original building was constructed in lime sukki mortar, we had to do that. Okay, during the earlier days, they did not have these motorized grinders. They used to have a bullock driven stone grinder. Okay, so we used a electrically operated grinder, stone grinder. So we had to do it in large quantities, and we had to do it quickly before the onset of rains. Okay. The entire process took about 9 months or slightly less than 9 months. Okay. So carpenters and then finishing. Okay, so one after the other, the components of the buildings are completed. Structural strengthening followed by architectural restoration. And you see the strengthening inside. Okay, so the multi-centered arch. Okay, so, and then you start plastering it. Okay, you see the crack on the left side. Okay, that was pushed back and then stitched using the reinforcement embedded into the into the masonry wall, and then it was plastered. Okay. And you see the ground floor almost on the verge of being completed. Okay, you see this. That is the condition of the building before and then after. Okay, so you still see the carpenters working. Okay. The condition of the roof. Okay, so fortunately, though there was a delamination of the soffit, okay, so we had to remove the entire soffit plaster and then redo this. Fortunately, the masonry part of that was not damaged. Okay, so some portion had to be reconstructed. You see the fallen portion within the rafter. In fact, some of the rafters are also had to be replaced. Okay, so we had to do that. It is possible to replace the rafters also. Okay, so in a picture indicating the condition before and during the rehabilitation. Again, yet another picture on the rear side of this building. Okay, you also see the carpenter's input over there. Okay, this is the left wing of the building. The structural strengthening was done, and you also notice that the staircase was removed. The RCC staircase was added at a later stage was removed. Okay, so the major distress was addressed in the end. Okay, so you can carefully see this. Okay, if you carefully observe this, you can see the reconstruction done. You may have to be careful about compatibility of the new construction with the old construction. You may have to take care of the toothing between the old and new masonry, and then you may want to introduce some dowel joints and things like that. All these was done. Because of paucity of time, I may have to skip those details. You are always welcome to get in touch with me for those details. This is the condition of the building before, and this is the condition of the building eventually after the entire retrofitting was done. Okay. So this is the case study. Okay. I have come to the end of the case study. I may want to give a small break to take a few questions on this particular case study. Depending upon the time, I may proceed further. Okay, so Dr. Sri Keshava, now I'm going to leave it open for a few interactions.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you, sir. It's a wonderful thing. We have to learn basic things related to heritage building, especially when repair and rehabilitation is a very important thing in case of buildings. In this case of buildings, so here we got a few questions from participants, sir. So the first question is there any particular case in structural strengthening is not possible to do repair and rehabilitation?
Sorry, can you come again with the question, please?
Is there any particular case in structural strengthening is not possible to do repair and rehabilitation?
Oh, okay. Yes, there are cases, as I mentioned earlier. You sometimes, if the repairing is not possible, you may have to resort to reconstruction. In fact, in this particular building, on the right hand side, as I mentioned earlier, the roof had completely come down. Okay, there's no way but that we could sort of continue with that repair techniques. We had to remove the entire roof and then reconstruct the roof. Okay, so some of the things call for reconstruction also. Okay, so it happens. Okay? So sometimes you may have to reconstruct if you are not able to structurally strengthen. I think that's how I understood the question. Okay, I'm not sure.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, one more question. It's how to get bending moment value at a particular section and how to control crack in concrete structures.
Okay. How to get the bending moment? You may have to use the first principles of civil engineering. Okay. You may want to make a judgment on what is support condition. Okay. And if you make a judgment that it's simply supported, you know how to find out the bending moment. If you know that it's fixed or if you know that it's partially fixed, you can get the upper bound and lower bound. Okay. And you have to resort to civil engineering principles. By the way, the case study which I talked about is load bearing masonry. So we rely heavily on the masonry code IS 1905. Okay, of course now we have got NBC 2016 section 4. Okay, so we have to rely on the codal provisions to assess the capacity of the load bearing elements. If it is a roofing element, mattress terrace roof, there is a codal provision for that. Okay, truss element, there is a codal provision for that. Okay, so foundation, very interestingly, this building had brick masonry foundation. I thought that it might have a stone masonry foundation. Very interesting. It was brick masonry in lime mortar. Okay, and in some portions, the back portion, it was brick masonry in mud mortar. So only when we exposed it, we found out that. So we had to get the profile of the foundation, and we had to use the expertise of a geotechnical engineer to find out the soil capacity and the foundation capacity. And knowing the structural configuration, we knew whether the foundation was adequate to withstand its own load. By the way, okay. So if there were some deficiencies, probably we would have strengthened the foundation. So you have to resort to civil engineering principles. Okay, there is no doubt about it. Okay, so I'm not sure if I understood the question properly. There's another part which is called as concrete. I did not know what was that related to concrete.
Sir, what is the most interesting non-engineering fact about this project? Yes,
okay. I may probably need several hours to talk about this. Okay. Okay. Non-engineering anecdotes. Okay, I can probably give. When we first went to the building, on the left-hand front room, okay, it was a small room. Okay, we encountered a snake. Okay, okay, that was something which is, of course, an anecdote. Non-engineering, there are a lot of things. Okay, I learned a lot from the conservation architects. Since the ground floor characters and the upper floor characters were very different, very interesting. Okay. And in fact, quite a few heritage buildings have noticed there are different roofing elements. You see some places you have got Madras terrace roofing, and suddenly you come across Jackass roofing. Suddenly you come across Bengal terrace roofing. Suddenly you come across truss roofing system, and so on and so forth. Okay. You see all these things, all these features in heritage buildings. Okay? So it looks very innocuous at a first glance, but as and when you start getting engaged with that building, okay, you find a lot of interesting things. I wish I had more time to interact with whoever asked that question. You want to get in touch with me, I'll be able to tell about this. Okay, so,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I will inform.
but okay, having said that, I take that question quite seriously.
Yes, sir.
I'm probably I may take 5 minutes for this experience, which I think I going to remain with me for a long time if I never forget it. I'll go back to this. We had to do the entire mortar in the structural component and the plastic also with the original configuration. We had to do with lime Surki mortar. So of course, Surki, we prepared it with locally available bricks, okay, and then ground it and then mixed it with lime. Of course, lime also we sourced it in a locally. But when we wanted to do the ornamental elements and then we wanted to do the Madras terrace roofing, in fact, I encountered with a 70-plus-year-old mason who was specially brought from district, Kadpa district in Andhra Pradesh. They contacted Mr. Somshekhar. Okay, he had he came across this mason who had a lot of experience in lime and then Madras terrace roofing and things like that. He came down to help us out. In fact, it's quite old, but he was able to train the younger masons. Okay? And then he also told me how the earlier Madras terrace roofing used to be done. Very although I knew that, okay, I had not seen that. Okay, he told me how the rafters are placed, and the mason sits on the rafter. Okay, and then he takes each brick, okay, and then applies the lime mortar. Both his hands are free because he's sitting on the rafter. He applies the mortar on the face of the brick, okay, and then sticks it to the first course or second course and multiple courses. And then till the next brick is placed, the knees are used as a supporting system. Okay, so he showed me that. Okay, it was very interesting. Although we could not do it in the original condition, we had used a formwork for that. Okay, he told me how we could do that. That was a real revealing thing for me. And he also told me why during those days the bricks used to be thinner. Okay, because if the bricks were thicker, it used to slide down very easily. So they could not support it with their knees. Okay, so he told about that. He also told about how to adjust the workability using innumerable number of organic elements. Okay. In fact, along with this, we had used, along with the lime grinder, we had used egg yolks, okay, and then we had fermented with bale fruits. Okay, it was upon his suggestion. Okay, and then he had also suggested the use of jaggery. Okay, for improving the workability and the gluiness. Okay, during the time of construction, all these things were extreme understanding for me. Honestly, I was humbled by the amount of knowledge which he had possessed. Okay, I have documented quite a few of whatever he has told. Okay, we are still. By the way, my interest in lime started after this building. Okay, today there are a couple of my students working on this lime. I hope to learn more about this in the process.
So it's really interesting, sir. One more question from the participant. Can you
Yes.
briefly share some info on retrofitting of SSM foundation for load-bearing structures?
Okay, I can share that PowerPoint presentation. Okay, with you, okay. Dr. C.K. Shiva, you
Yes,
can
sir.
share with them. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So SSM Foundation, typically one of the easiest way of strengthening an SSM foundation, which is found to be inadequate for the modern day condition, is to add layered courses and abutments below the ground level. It is possible. There are also underpinning and shoring techniques. Okay, so there are extremely complicated methods also. Okay, so in fact, there are ways by which you can carefully remove the SSM foundation and insert raft beams. Okay, to that level, we have got the engineering today. I'm going to share some basic SSM strengthening techniques as soon as my lecture is over. Okay, so you can share it with the participants.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Sir, one last question. Rehabilitation and repairs of a particular building suggested from different sources are expected to be different. Is there any final say on decision-making process?
Oh, it's a very good question. I knew this was coming. This question was coming. One of the difficulties and one of the major difficulties in rehabilitation, repair, retrofitting, and conservation, okay, is that all the stakeholders have to be on the same page when you want to take a decision. For instance, something which is as simple as what should be the eventual color of the building, okay, it's not easy to take a decision. Okay, in fact, there are conservation architects who are so specialized in figuring out what would have been the earlier color of the building. They do a very detailed microscopic analysis of different layers of the surface. Okay, they use microscopic studies to extract the surfaces. Okay, and then eventually find out what was the first surface of this building. Okay, I just gave an example. Okay, so and one of the complex decisions as a civil engineer is what is the original material used. Obviously, you can make a judgment on whether it is lime mortar or cement mortar or whatever it is. Okay, but what is the composition of that? Okay, you may have to resort to chemical analysis, and these days you have got more modern day equipments like scanning electron microscope and XRD and DAX analysis and things like that. In fact, because paucity of time, I'm not showing these things. Okay, as a part of completeness of this, we had done chemical analysis. We had done XRD of the type of pozzolana used in this building and things like that. Okay, it's a protocol also. Okay, so you don't want to miss out on the trying to match with the original equipments used. Okay. So you also try to figure out what could be the type of lime used, whether it is a highly reactive lime or what type of magnesia lime, things like that. You have to find out that. Okay, so it's a part of the protocol. So to answer the question, all the stakeholders, the historians, conservation architects, the engineers, okay, and the other stakeholders have to be on the same page while taking a decision. In fact, that happens to be one of my concluding remarks. Okay, so it's quite complex, but it's also something which one has to undergo. Okay, so some of the decisions may not be correct. For example, a civil engineer ideally would like, when in doubt, you want to redo the entire thing. You may want to remove the component and redo it. It's very easy for civil engineers to say, okay, look, let us not repair it. We'll just remove that component and rebuild it. Okay, so that's very easy. Okay, but then sometimes it may not be correct also from the other's point of view.
Yes, sir. Sir, thank you, sir, for clarifying all doubts.
Yeah.
And
Am I running out of time or?
no, sir. Still, we are having 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes.
I will quickly take you to a small thing which I wanted to share. There is this aspect of structural health monitoring, okay, which is also very important. Okay, so I dedicated these slides after the end of this case study because henceforth structural health monitoring is going to become one major driving force in civil engineering. It becomes a separate branch of civil engineering itself. Okay, this is done in modern structures. For example, infrastructure projects like metros and bridges and dams. Okay, you embed them with a lot of sensors and then gather the information on real-time basis. Okay, what's happening to those components. Okay, so structural health monitoring plays a very important role. Okay. This International Council on Monuments and Sites have come out with a lot of guidelines for heritage buildings also. How are you going to use the modern day technology, okay, to monitor the heritage buildings? Okay, it has come out with this. Okay, and you can use a lot of, as I mentioned earlier, while one may tend to think that visual strength grading is subjective, there are quantitative parameters also available. Okay, though it may add to the cost. For example, in one of the case studies, which I'm going to quickly come to, okay, we had to find out the in situ shear strength of masonry. We had embedded load cell, okay, into the wall itself to find out the response of the wall when it was subjected to shear load, okay, and we embedded a strain gauge to get the shear stress versus shear strain. Okay, it is possible. Okay. So structural health monitoring plays a very important role. Okay, so there are a lot of parameters there of what should be the approach. Okay, preventive strategy and quantitative recording. As I mentioned, we have started moving from qualitative parameters to quantitative parameters. More and more advanced countries, they are talking about quantitative descriptors. Okay. They don't want to rely on qualitative parameters. Okay, so damage detection. Okay, and then has also become a very complicated thing. You also resort to modern day softwares, okay, and then simulation softwares and things like that. Of course, we are aware of finite element and things like that. So you've got other modern day softwares also, okay, and then a lot of sensors, okay, not only embedded sensors, non-contact type of sensors also. Okay. Very thin, very smart sensors. Okay, so it can detect a lot of parameters. Okay, and they are all embedded. Okay, and by the way, structural health monitoring is not only for the superstructure; it's also for the substructure. Okay, the soil and the foundation. Okay, and also for the deep part of the below the ground level, below the water table level. Okay, inclination you can measure, tilting you can measure. Okay, and also through modern equipments. Okay, like tilt meter, deflection meter. Okay, and you can get the data real time. Okay, it's the data comes through internet. Okay, so it is put on the cloud. Okay, one can access the data at any point in the world. Okay, you can just have to download the data and then process it. Okay, yeah, I would like to make some closing remarks. Generally, the term restoration refers to careful and strategic architectural and structural intervention made in order to regain or retain the originality. Okay, I presume that the building which I showed in the beginning and then towards the end, okay, we have regained, okay, or retained the originality to the maximum extent possible. Okay, so I just wanted to stress upon that. Okay. Within the ambit of the principles of conservation. Okay, without changing the character of the building. Okay, we did not use any of the modern day elements, but for the stitching of the cracks. Okay, we could have done without that also other through traditional methods of stitching. Okay, maybe some other time, some other opportunity, I'll talk about that also. Okay. Stakeholders responsible for this strive to retain the form, the feature, and the character of the building. It's very important. A civil engineer cannot bulldoze his decision onto the conservation architect, neither the other way around. Okay, and we should also respect the historian's perspective also. Okay, and it should not be done at the primary cost of cost. Okay, finance is very, very important. Okay? Restoration should be performed to reverse the effects of deterioration. That's also important in my opinion. It's not that you bring it back to its original glory, but you also ensure that it starts performing better and better in the future. The difficulty lies in retaining the authenticity as accurately as possible, because you are not equipped with any codal provisions in the first place, and you have to make a judgment of several parameters which you actually, whether you measure it or visually see it, you need to make an engineering judgment. Okay? So that's a difficult part. Okay, so quite often restoration is a learning process. It's not the end in itself. It's just a means. Okay? So it's a journey. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, preparation of lime surkey in this building was quite a challenge. Okay. Some experienced masons they were helping us out. Okay. The duration of the project was 10 months. It was completed much earlier than this. Okay. So it was formally, you can use the word re-inaugurated on 8 December 2012. Okay. Lastly, heritage conservation is an opportunity for engineers. Okay, in my opinion, okay, as I've learned a lot than giving a lot. Okay. certainly. I have learned to understand materials and techniques and technologies in a more comprehensive manner. Okay, I've learned quite a lot about the culture, the engineering culture during those days. What are the innovative solutions and the social aspects? Okay, so what are the risks involved and the hazards, okay, impact on the surroundings? Okay, how to co-work with a lot of stakeholders. Okay. I was quite humbled with quite a lot of stakeholders. Aptitude to think from basics, okay. Apply the fundamentals of civil engineering. Okay. Lastly, it learned me to be humane and with a lot of humility. Okay. Thanks to quite a lot of these people. Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Srikesh.
Uh, yes, sir. We're actually very much overwhelmed to have your presentation in this particular FDP. By the topic of your the repair and rehabilitation of heritage masonry building case study, even the project duration was 10 months. It gave us so much enlightenment of the significance of a heritage structure, because since Mysore is a heritage city, and when we go across the town, the streets of Mysore, it is always the outlook as well as the heritage as well as the tradition of Mysore that attracts any tourist or any individual that will be traveling to Mysore. So on that note, your effort in rehabilitating as well as repairing the significant structure used by Dr. Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan is of very much important, and it gave us very good inspiration to also have this into our curriculum as well as a practice of civil engineering, because whenever we look at advancement, even the repair and rehabilitation is also plays a major role. Not only having an advanced structure is important to civil engineering, of course rehabilitation of any heritage structure is also an advancement of the structure to make it more useful, and extending its lifetime is also very much significant in our arena. So we on this note, on the behalf of civil engineering, I would like to extend a very warm and hearty thankfulness to your presentation, sir. We were very happy to have you here. Thank you so much, sir.
Thanks and all the best to all the participants. I hope to get more opportunity to talk about some very interesting projects in Bangalore. Okay, so especially the Fort High School building, which I'm fondly associated with. Okay, a lot of things which I learned through that building. I hope to share that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Have a nice day.
Huh? Yeah, can I log out now, Doctor?
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, yes.
Yeah. Sure.
A small note to the participants. The next session will be at 11:30 a.m. The speaker is Dr. Naveen BP, Head and Associate Professor, Amity University, Haryana. The topic is pile design and construction practice for metro projects. Kindly stay tuned for
Same.
the next session at 11:30 a.m. So we will be having a brief coffee break. So we will meet you at 11:30 a.m. Thank you.